Fáilte. It's Michelle, Dr. Karen Ward, and I am very happy to be with you here this evening for another edition of the Mind Your Precious Self series. And this one is all about increasing your self-worth. Now, there's a very interesting term, and probably you've been following me during the week on Instagram and Facebook, and you've got a sense of what this is about. To be honest, we bandy the word self-esteem, or indeed those two words, about quite a lot. But what does it actually mean? And most importantly, how does it relate to us personally? And of course, what can we do to increase our self-worth? Well, if we went to any number of dictionaries, they would say something like, your self-worth is the value you place on yourself, or it's the opinion you hold about yourself, or it's a quality that you hold that either commands self-respect, self-esteem from others as well, or not, as the case may be. Are we born with bucket loads of self-worth? How do we lose it along the way? Or is it one of these traits that we pick up as we grow, especially from our formative years? And perhaps it is a quality that we learn how to harness and to increase exponentially as we get older. So let's explore how this is for us personally. How do you know what it is, and how do you know how much you have? Well, if we think of the very basic term, how do you value yourself? And we looked at a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is very low and 10 is very high. How would you rate your self-worth? Are you a person of value? Are you somebody that others respect? Or internally, do you feel not whole, not all there, as though you could be more? If your score is anywhere from 7 to 8 to 9 to 10, well done. You're on par. I think if somebody said, oh, my self-worth was 10, you could be a little bit in denial, or you could be very much inflating your sense of self. Most of us are around 7, 8. And, sometimes we tip up to 9, but we do leave room for improvement, which is why we might not say, oh, I'm at a 10. If you're somewhere between 4, 5, 6, yeah, there's a lot of room for improvement, but, there is a basis there. But if you're anywhere under 3, well, then that's something that you need to look at sooner rather than later. Now that we know what self-worth is, let's look at how it can be affected and how a lack of it or less of it can be fostered in our lives without us realizing it. The interesting thing is, often we learn how to increase our self-worth by learning what affects it. So that sounds like a bit of a contraindication, but follow with me and perhaps this will all become crystal clear if I'm doing my job properly here. We are born tiny little creatures, and in an ideal world, both of our parents are there for us. They're in a loving relationship. They have good self-worth, and they pass it on to us. Does that sound like an ideal situation? Yes, it is, but we don't live in an ideal world. And we know now from extensive studies that often in utero, when we're floating about in our womb, whatever's going on externally affects us. Whether our parents are in a loving relationship, whether they're in a place that is unsafe, whether there's not enough money to go around, or there's loads of children, or they're nervous first-time parents. All of that is picked up because we're just literally a heartbeat away from what's going on externally. Our birth can come into it, because if we have a traumatic birth, then we're likely to have very worried parents, and perhaps even our mother is we're taken away from her. And that can bring on an early sense of rejection. We're not getting that loving connection, that bond, as it's often referred to, as quickly as we should. And then, of course, we come home and maybe, as I said, there's nervous parents, or perhaps we are one down the line of children. Maybe there's 6 or 7. Perhaps there is some sort of abuse going on at home, maybe emotional or verbal or domestic or whatever. And that can really affect us, because in our little world as children, we think the world revolves around us, because it does at that tiny age. And if there's something going on adversarial at home, then we can pick up, oh my gosh, I didn't do my homework, or I didn't eat all my dinner, or there's something wrong with me. And this is why mommy's crying, and this is why daddy goes away, or whatever the case may be. And that chips away at our self-worth. That's kind of a dramatic example, but even at a very basic example where mum and dad and the children seem to have a lovely middle-class existence, if there's any sort of tension between them, that alone can cause us as little ones to think, oh my gosh, I must be doing something wrong here, or why is daddy always angry when he's around me, or why is mummy nervous? And then it can directly affect us. Many of us come from an era when children were to be seen, not to be seen, or to be seen and not heard. Was that the expression? So in other words, if we were exuberantly running around the garden full of joy as children, we might have been told to sit down, shut up, don't annoy me. And again, that dampens down our exuberance, our sense of worth. Like, oh my gosh, I must be doing something wrong. I'm in the wrong place. I'm in the wrong family. Why is everybody reacting like this to me? When all you're trying to do is be a child playing and full of joy. Now let's take it to our parents' self-worth, and even back to our grandparents. If you come from Ireland, your grandparents will probably have lived through a world war, the troubles in Northern Ireland. They might have even been back as far as a revolution. Definitely an awful lot of what we would describe here as economic situations. So in other words, there might have been a depression, or there might have been the economic situation wasn't what it could be. So in other words, there wasn't enough money around, and that will affect the tension and the self-worth. If any of us have had parents, a mother who was frustrated because she couldn't work, or a father who lost his job or wasn't promoted, again, that can affect their self-worth, and it comes down the line to us. And then, of course, there are siblings. So maybe we had a very outgoing older sibling who was a bit bossy, or maybe we had the mean child who lived next door who's a bit jealous of your Crawley doll, and then they commented on that. So again, all of these can chip away at us, particularly if we are of a sensitive nature. And we haven't even got to school yet. And of course, that's a whole other situation. Today, we are very lucky in the world to have such things as Montessori schools, Maria Montessori and Rudolf Steiner schools, where they really focus on each child's ability. Bill, oh, such a wonderful child. He brings everybody together. And Melissa, oh, she's a lovely little one. She's the one in the group that has a beautiful smile. And then they might say, oh yeah, and Mark's quite good at maths. Oh, and Brenda, yeah, she's quite good at crafts. In other words, everything is considered a wonderful skill and something to be brought out, not simply academic learning by rote and regurgitating it in an exam. And if you haven't had a brilliant memory, and if you're not academically minded, that again can chip away at that feeling of, I'm not good enough. Somebody's not rating me in the same way they rate my sister, my brother, my cousins, the girl that sits beside me in the class. And of course, here in Ireland, we certainly have very busy 30 kids in a classroom and a teacher trying to valiantly control the crowd to get everybody to a place where learning can actually happen. And great strides have happened in schoolwork. Now children can be assessed for dyspraxia, dyslexia, and there might even be a sense of this child needs a special education assistant, which is great. Whereas back in the day, that didn't happen. And a frustrated teacher might have taken that out on the child. Again, I'm showing my age here, but I grew up in a time where the teacher slapping you was the norm. In fact, your parents slapping you was the norm. Now, of course, we know differently, and that doesn't happen, thankfully. Then we move on to relationships. So whatever our sexual orientation, whether it be male, female, or other, when we move into relationship, we are at a very tentative stage, exposing ourselves to be very vulnerable to other. We're probably very conscious of peer pressure and, oh my gosh, everybody else seems to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend and I don't. And therefore you might take whatever's on the go, and that person might not be a good match for you. And again, in their nervousness, they might be, what's the term, break it off with you publicly behind the bicycle shed, or they also might pressurize you into being physical too quickly when you're not ready. And these all foster a sense of not being good enough. Your qualities aren't being rated and perhaps not respected. So physically, you might feel it as something, pressure in your heart, or sick feeling in your stomach, or butterflies in the belly. Maybe even there's a physical withdrawal. So the head goes down, the shoulders go down. So all of the physique is showing, oh, I don't think I'm worthy. I don't think I'm good enough as much as the others. And of course, unfortunately, that compounds the problem, because the other children or the people at home or whoever in society can pick up on this and go, oh, we're not picking her for the hockey team, or that guy, oh, we're not picking him for this because I don't want to go out with her because she looks like she's not good fun or whatever. Whereas the exact opposite, if we do hold a sense of self-worth, we would tend to have our shoulders back, our head up, smile on our face, straight spine, and we would walk with a sense of purpose, with a sense of, yes, I know who I am as much as I can at this stage of my life. I hope I've given you enough about what can contribute to a lack of self-worth, because I really, really want to move on to what we can do and what increasing your self-worth brings you. Because I'm very much a glass half full kind of gal. And that says an awful lot about our attitude to life. And it is one surefire way of increasing your self-worth. Now, let me explain this. If we go back to the girl who's, oh, I don't think I'm good enough. And then she goes to drama class and suddenly she plays a character who's much more confident. She might see the reaction of the other children and think, oh, this is different. This is interesting. Then you could take it to the level, well, if I can change my physical body to act as if I'm more confident, maybe I can change what's going on up here. So instead of running that commentary, internal commentary, I'm not good enough, I won't get the spellings right, no boy's going to look at me, you know how it goes, that we can look at, well, I'm really good at gardening, or in fact, I'm a very kind person, or actually my nieces and nephews really love to be in my company. In other words, we are holding in our thoughts and consciousness the positive sides. We are picking out the best of us rather than waiting for somebody externally to do that. And by holding the positive, we affect our emotions and we affect our physical demeanor. In other words, by ruminating on what we're not doing or not good at, that negativity causes us to shrink, which decreases our self-worth. Whereas if we hold in our head the positivity of what we are doing well, then we blossom. We're like the rose opening her petals. And that's one tip that I would give you. Act as if physically, and then catch yourself ruminating or switching to that glass half empty and hold the positive. Some of you might know of the Pollyanna Approach. So Pollyanna was a character in a book, and they actually made a film of it as well. And she was a little girl who, no matter what happened in her life, she always saw the glass half full. And I think in one case, it might have been a Victorian type, it was a long time ago. And for Christmas, she was sent a crutch, like a wooden crutch, instead of a doll. And everybody was, oh my gosh, this is terrible. What's she going to do? Is she going to cry? Is she? And to Pollyanna, she went, oh my gosh, I'm so lucky I don't need to use this crutch, but maybe somebody else does. Maybe I'll find somebody who does need it. Again, she saw the positive in it rather than the negative, which was pretty amazing for a child of that age. And let's move on to other ways that we can help our minds hold that glass half full. One of them is affirmations. Now, some of you, most of you, I'm sure will have heard of them, and some of you would be very familiar with them. So an affirmation is a very simple sentence. It's personal. It starts with the word I. It's positive, and it's always, the noun is always in the present tense. Let me give you an example. So let's say you are holding the thought in your head. You notice a frequent, in work, at the canteen, nobody talks to me. So you're holding that in your head and you're going into the canteen and you're and of course, everybody else is having their lunch and they're thinking, she doesn't look like very good company. So they move somewhere else. The affirmation that would counteract nobody wants to sit with me would be something like, I am confident. I am great company to be with. Now, in the midst of, oh, I don't think I'm good company, or I'm not good company, you might think to yourself, well, why would you say I am good company when clearly at the moment I'm not? You see, this is where the affirmation comes in. It needs to be in the present tense so that it gloriously tricks our head into thinking, oh, so I'm confident now, and oh, I am good company, great. Because what we tell this glorious organic computer in our mind, guess what? It comes to pass. It's called the law of attraction. So what we hold, we attract. Now, that's either a very scary thought or an absolutely amazing thought. It sounds a bit airy-fairy, but you know what? It's simple. It's maths. It's simple physics, if you think about it. Like attracts like. Think of magnets. Like attracts like. Therefore, if your affirmation is, I am great fun to be with, and you tell yourself as you're in, maybe you're in the toilet washing your hands and you're preparing for lunch, I'm great company to be with, I'm great company to be with. And you might sing it in your head, or you might say it in a different language, or you might emphasize a different word. I am great company to be with. I am great company to be with. And then when you go into the lunchroom, you have the spine straight, the head up, and you're probably smiling to yourself thinking, what am I like saying this mad affirmation? But what will happen is the other people with their tray of food will look around and see this smiling person, and they'll think, oh, do you want to share that table there? Or they'll sit beside you and you'll think, oh my gosh, this is working. And that is bound to increase your self-worth. In other words, you've recognized there's something negative going on. you've done something to counteract it. And suddenly you're going from a 4 up to a 5, or even a 4.5, because you think, oh, actually, there's a sense of increasing your empowerment because you have done something. Nobody's waved a magic wand. Nobody has given you the magic pill. You have actually been able to change the situation yourself. Now, we'll continue on with this law of attraction. I'm sure some of you are familiar with The Secret. And that, again, talks about keeping a very positive approach. Now, it doesn't mean that you are, you deny and just block out completely anything that's gone wrong or any mistakes you've made. Not at all. You own them, you note what you're doing, and then you think, must remember not to do that again. You dust yourself off, and then you move forward. In other words, you let it go. Let it go. And then you'll notice that in those small ways, perhaps with the affirmations, or expecting, why would you not deserve what everybody else seems to have? Why would you not deserve the very best? You're a good person. You're doing your best in life. If that's hard for you to say, then look back to your formative years and think, why would I have picked up the sense that I'm not? Was it my mother, my father, a grandmother, or a step parent who looked after me? Was it a school teacher? Was it an older sibling or a cousin? Where did you, as a small child, somehow learn that you were not to be rated or respected? Because somewhere back there is going to be the reason. Now, that's good to have that awareness, but it doesn't mean that it's going to cloud your life forever. We need to move on. Here's an interesting that we psychotherapists and counselors and psychologists would know, that a normal part of the growing up process is that at some point we're going to blame usually our parents for the woes of the world. In other words, if things aren't going to plan, we're going to blame somebody else. It's much easier to blame somebody else. And whether you blame your parents for 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, 50 years, or a lifetime, maturity means that we look at and say, well, do you know what? They did the best they could. Wasn't great. Maybe it was good some of the time. Maybe it was awful. But that was it. It's up to us to move forward. We have the power to change the dialogue going on here. And we can do it. It's not going to happen overnight, but it will happen. There's a phenomenon, I'm sure some of you know, in the sports world, that if somebody hits a tennis ball 10,000 times, then automatically they're going to be good. I mean, you can't do something 10,000 times and not pick up some sort of skill set in it. If, as we were children, we were constantly told we were stupid, we were bold, we were naughty, then it's up to us to tell ourselves the counteracting of that. And this is where those affirmations come in. But there's something else we can do. During the week, I suggested that you think to yourself, where are you and who are you with when your self-worth is higher than at other times? Now, there's a very good question, because we might, oh, my self-worth is really low all the time. When you're asleep? No, not when I'm asleep. Who do you live with? Oh, well, I live with my sister. My sister, we get on so well, and I live with my housemate, and we have this fantastic cat. Okay, so how do you get on with your sister? Fantastic, brilliant. How's your housemate? Oh, she is my, sister from another mister, and the cat is, we dote on the cat. Okay, so when you're at home, how's your self-worth? Oh yeah, yeah, I feel great at home. Sure, the three of us have fantastic fun. It's really safe. It's a great environment. We all love to cook. We do our yoga. We do this. So in the company of your sister and your friend and this cat, your self-worth is what? Oh, it would be an 8. Okay. So how's your self-worth at work? Well, I'm doing a lot of work by Zoom at the moment, but I do go in now and again, and it's 6. Why? Oh, we have this manager. Oh, and what happens there? Oh, he's always on my case. Why? Oh, listen, he's a perfectionist, and I just couldn't be bothered. So my desk is messy, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what can you do? What do you mean? Well, is there anything you can do to ameliorate the situation at work? Well, I suppose if I had to tidy your desk, okay, would that be hard to do? Well, it'd be a bit of work, but I could do it. Okay, and how would the boss be? Well, I suppose if I came in on time, he's a stickler for time. There you go. So you see, it can be within your grasp. This manager is watching everybody else come in time. You're not. Everybody else seems to be doing, and your desk is a mess. In his world, he's not doing his job unless he makes sure that everybody is or seems to be doing their best. Now, you could come in late and still do amazing work, and you could have a messy desk and still be the top employee. But if it's really upsetting this particular person who has the ability to lower your self-worth, well, then in my world, it's worth making a bit of an effort. Or you could say, is the job worth it? Is there somewhere else you could work? Do you feel fulfilled by your work? There's a good question, because that will certainly have an effect on our self-worth. Who are you with and what are you doing? Oh, I've taken up sea swimming. I feel $1 million when I come out of the sea. Brilliant. How's your self-worth been since you became a dry rover? Actually, I would say it's increased. Bingo. Let's keep up that sea swimming. How is your self-worth when you go home to your family of origin? Oh, I revert back. I'm a confident woman. I'm out in the world. And then I go home and I become the geeky youngest child who everybody stepped over. Nobody rated. Nobody wanted to play with me. In other words, some work needs to be done in the home environment, the home of origin, the family of origin. And it might be sitting outside in the car or on the bike, taking a breath, psyching yourself up before you go in and recognizing, I am not a young child here anymore. I'm an adult. I can bring that confident woman or confident man in with me. And that's going to make such a difference. Let me come on to an interesting concept here. When we talk about self-worth, it can be as though something has latched onto us that's dragging us down. And it might be we are carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders, or it's almost like she's looking daggers at me, or he broke my heart. Or sometimes there's almost like an invisible umbilical cord of a tie that binds us from an ex-partner who was demeaning in their language towards you, who gave the impression that you weren't good at something. It might be cooking, it might be whatever, telling jokes. And we walk forward in life, the relationship's over, we're not in the family of origin, or we're not at school anymore, but we're carrying the weight of it, or the broken heart, or those daggers, or that connection back to that not very nice partner. And we can, with our intention, but also even imagine ourselves like unplugging, cutting off that tie, healing our heart, taking out those daggers, shifting the weight off our shoulders. And we can do that perhaps in a visualization. You can do it in just when you're in that dreamy state before you go to sleep. Or you could have a talk with a trusted friend where you recognize what these might be. Or you can go to a professional couple of sessions with a counselor or psychotherapist, or there's many holistic therapists who would work in this area as well. We're talking about energy therapy work here. Session of Reiki, bioenergy, there are lots of us out there. And that could really give you the impetus to let go of the past, to choose, why am I thinking about that ex-boyfriend? He's not thinking about me. Why am I thinking about school or that? In other words, there's a healing taking place that allows you to increase your self-worth, to go, I am a good person. I deserve the best. And that's a lovely way of moving forward. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. It's part of life's journey, but it also is part of maturity. It's where we decide, do you know what? That happened, but I choose to move forward in a different way. And maybe like that Pollyanna approach, you're recognizing, gosh, so-and-so has a really hard life, or look at what's going on there. And they seem to be coping with it, or they seem to be able to forge ahead in some way. We don't know what they do at home. They could be crying their eyes out every night, or they could be sleeping for Ireland, England, Scotland, or Wales. Whatever works. They might be into yoga, Tai Chi, or whatever. But let me tell you a very interesting secret. Time and time again, we come across books or documentaries or TED Talks or some sort of conference where there are very highfalutin people who are top of their game. Now, they might be celebrities, politicians, they could be world leaders, they could be in anything. And there's common denominators when they share a little bit about their life. Usually, they are in a committed relationship. They eat well. They exercise. They have love in their life. So that might be children or grandchildren or parents or their pets. And very importantly, they have some sort of transpersonal belief system. So they might be from a formal religion, or they might be really into nature, or they might be some sort of spiritual belief. It doesn't really matter what it is. And then you realize, okay, to be the top of their game, whatever that might be, they've got to have a good self-worth. Now, we're talking about somebody who's consistent. You sometimes come across celebrities that are kind of overnight fame or one-hit wonders, and their self-esteem or their self-worth mightn't be as big as it could be. But if you have somebody who consistently over a career holds that really good longevity, their self-worth is high. And it's not a magic formula. But to eat well, to exercise, to be in a committed relationship, to have love in your life, to have some sort of belief system, takes time, takes energy, but is it worth it? And the interesting thing is these people have come from different backgrounds. They're not all living charmed lives. They might have had extreme deprivation or poverty growing up. Sometimes you'll hear somebody say, well, I've come from a very wealthy background, but in fact, my parents weren't there for me. I was given money, but I wanted love and I didn't have the attention. Whereas another person could come from what we might consider a lower socioeconomic background, but oh my gosh, the love was pouring out of that household, and that sustains them. This is our choice. We can increase our self-worth. And we can start with the really simple things, the exercise, what we eat. We can use that little rating scale if it's helpful to think, well, I'm a 5, but what do I need to go to a 6? Who sustains me? Who do I hang around with that really I feel worth, a person of worth, a person of quality, a person of respect, and hang out with them more. If you love the sea swimming, well, then do it every day if you can, or at least once a week. Reading, yoga, Tai Chi, football, it could be racing snails up the wall. It really doesn't matter. But it is important that you find out what it is. Love is important. And you don't have to be in a romantic relationship to have love in your life. It might be your cat or your dog or your granny or your parents or the neighbor next door, your best friend. And the most important person is to love ourselves. And that's the most difficult. But once we increase our self-worth, we move into a position to be able to love ourselves enough to move past whatever was in those formative years and to forge a way ahead, to be able to view our future. Yes, I am worthy of this. You've heard me say it before. One of the most famous advertising straplines ever is the L'Oreal, because you're worth it. Whoever came up with that was a genius, or probably knew at a very deep level, oh, if I can do something for myself, if I can wear brightly colored clothes, if I get my hair done, then I feel a little bit of a pep in my step. And that helps me look at what else I can do to increase my self-worth. And we are worth it. You are worth it. Mille buíochas, I really hope that was helpful. And even if there's only one thing that you take away from me sharing my many years as a counseling psychotherapist, as a holistic therapist, and as a woman in the world who's had to work hard to build up her self-worth. I look forward to the next time.